wasn't the way that South Carolina wanted to go out, but unfortunately for the Gamecocks, they fall in the SEC tournament to Auburn in the quarterfinals. They are headed back to Columbia tonight. And what was it? Let's just call for what it is, Joe. Very disappointing game. You were hoping to see South Carolina come out and be able to play faster in the first half. I felt like we talked about this yesterday. Having an opportunity to play in that first game, getting the cobwebs off you. Auburn, have an extra day, double bye. Sometimes you see those teams come out. We saw it in Tennessee, first game for crying out loud against Mississippi State, where teams come out after not playing for nearly a week. And we saw that with South Carolina in the first half a little bit yesterday as well. And that team that played the day before is able to come out and get things going quickly. That wasn't the case for South Carolina today. Auburn shot lights out. They shot about 60% when they played against each other about, a month ago. Today, that number was around 50. Just your initial thoughts about what we saw today.
Yeah, Mike, terrible shooting night for the Gamecocks, right? You made 16 shots all game, 16 of 57, 28% from field goal range, right? Like that's just not acceptable, especially against a team like Auburn. Offensively on the rebounds, you only got out rebounded by 2, right? The boards didn't seem to be as much of a key to this game. It was the shooting, right, Mike? It was the shooting. We know South Carolina is a streaky team, and tonight it just wasn't there, right? And the defense, South Carolina's defense usually is what, allows them to stay in games like this. But, tonight their defense didn't really show up. They struggled, a little bit on the defensive end, and it just led to Auburn points, right? They couldn't get back into this game, as much as they would try. Had a big shot, South Carolina. Their defense would not let them back in this game.
Yeah, I was just disappointed because, look, obviously at one point when you're seeing Auburn shooting, and it was close to like 55%, South Carolina, they struggled to do anything offensively throughout the course of the game. But in that first half, it's just like, when are they going to be able to get over that hump? When are they going to be able to generate some type of rhythm? And unfortunately for this Gamecock team, going up against a very good Auburn team, let's call it for what it is, okay? I know some people will talk about we're not talking about officiating, because officiating had nothing to do with it today, all right? I felt like for the most part, the officials let both teams play. There were some calls that you could go back and forth for both teams and say, okay, hey, they didn't call this, or hey, they called that a little tight. But if you've been paying attention to SEC basketball for the last decade, you understand what it comes down to when we're talking about SEC officiating. I'm not going to waste our time with that. I just wanted to see South Carolina try to find a way to get into some type of rhythm. We saw them yesterday, whether it be from behind the arc. They struggled to get anything going yesterday. They were 3 of 15 today, 3 of 12 from behind the arc. Weren't able to do that. They just weren't able to do it. Obviously, Auburn's a very physical team when it comes down to being in the paint. We saw it was a very physical game. And as you mentioned, South Carolina getting rebounds. That's what allowed them to stay in the game as long as they did in the first half. But then eventually not being able to score, that's going to catch up to you. And that caught up to the Gamecocks today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it really did. And, Michi Johnson with 3 points. Again, Michi's your top scorer. You want him to perform better. You get 1 3 all weekend, right? And so the shooting just wasn't there today. And, when you can't stop Auburn, like you just couldn't today. And again, I saw comments saying that South Carolina, it's just a bad matchup. Yeah, absolutely, right? You match up very similar. Auburn, and, when they have a little bit more size and a little bit more speed, that's going to happen, right? And they just wear you out throughout the game. There's a lot next for the South Carolina team. There's a lot that they can build on from this, right? And, I'm sure they're going to take this film and, shout credit to all of them. Got the ball out, right? They shot the ball a lot better than South Carolina did, especially down the stretch. They cleaned it up with the shooting, and there was just consistency, right? Consistency wins in conference tournaments, and Auburn seemed to have the most consistency, and the extra rest didn't seem to bug Auburn a bit. And, South Carolina couldn't find any rhythm shooting the ball. I think it was something you were kind of looking for to bring in yesterday, and you just couldn't, right? The offense just could not buy a bucket, and, when you shoot that poorly, I don't think you're going to win many games.
Going back to that first half in particular, again, we mentioned being able to come out there, being able to punch Auburn in the face early on and take advantage of the fact that you played a day prior. It wasn't the case. The Tigers shot just over 48% in the first half, 17 to 35. The Gamecocks shot 25% from the field in the first half. Just 7 baskets for USC in that first half. And it was pretty much the same in the second half. Now, one thing that really hurt South Carolina was just that. I mean, injuries starting to pile up a little bit, and you hope that having the opportunity to rest up now for a week, get ready for the NCAA tournament, find out on Sunday where you're going, when you're going to be playing. Injuries started to catch up to them today. I'm not saying that was the reason why they lost, because, again, Auburn shot lights out. But not being able to have a guy like Miles Studi, not being able to turn to your bench in situations where you just felt like South Carolina needed a change. And Talon Cooper rolling his ankle in the second half, that didn't help either. I saw a moment where Talon looked like he was going to check in around that 13.5 mark. He got up, started walking gingerly. Lamont Paris told him, hey, take a seat, gather yourself, check someone else in. 2 minutes later, Cooper went in, but he only lasted 30 seconds. And at that point, because the way the game was going, it wasn't even worth putting Cooper on the help here. So you take Cooper out of the mix. Miles Studi dealing with a hip pointer to the point where I saw him walking around with a limp. Heading into today, the Gamecocks released on their athletic page that he was going to be day-to-day, meaning if South Carolina were to advance tomorrow, there's a possibility that he would have played. So I'm not too concerned about Studi as far as next week is concerned. Expect him to be back out there. I expect Cooper to be back out there after rolling his ankle today. But those were some of the other things, too, that South Carolina was dealing with.
Yeah, you missed a full health Talon Cooper in that second half. I mean, if you were going to get back into the game, you needed him to be, aggressive on the offensive end. And when you roll your ankle, Mike, I mean, I'm sure you've done it as well. You're not going to be, 100% yourself, let alone aggressive, right? You're going to play in favor of that ankle a lot. And, I think if South Carolina had any chance to get back in this game, Talon Cooper rolling his ankle was not good. And then I think, having Studi out, I think Studi could have been the difference maker. And granted, he didn't play as much yesterday, because he's still dealing with the lingering injury. But then, he also goes down with the hip pointer. We could have used him quite a bit today. And, just the depth, right? I think South Carolina has a lot of it. But when, you get down, guys being hurt as much as you were with Studi being down, I think it adds up and it catches up with you pretty quickly. But I certainly think Cooper would have made a difference in that second half. But do I think it would have been enough? Probably not. Auburn was still shooting the ball really, really well. Shout out to Bruce Pearl and, his team again. Like we said, they had a really, really, really good shooting night. And, Lamont had to throw out this film, too, because they shot really, really, really well. And that's kind of what he said, about the last Auburn game, is that he almost threw out the film. But, this...
Yeah, you would have liked to see South Carolina be able to find some type of rhythm behind the arc today. You mentioned it yesterday. Shot 3 of 15 behind the arc. We're only able to make 3 threes today. In a game like this against Auburn, a team that shoots the ball very well, and for the reasons we talked about from a matchup standpoint, this is a game, and I'm not trying to make excuses up. We're just going for what it is. This is one of those teams that is just a bad matchup for South Carolina. I've had a chance to talk to a couple other beat reporters. I've had a chance to talk to a couple national reporters over the course of the game. And, that's what it just came down to is Auburn, when you look at it from a matchup standpoint, what South Carolina is able to do so well, they're, in a sense, like their kryptonite. That's just what it is. So the good thing for South Carolina, hopefully you don't have to see Auburn in the tournament. They're playing some very good basketball. They're going to be playing Mississippi State tomorrow. Give credit to the Bulldogs, but Auburn has an opportunity to make it to the SEC championship game. They're a very tough team. But having said that, I think when you look at South Carolina today, when you go back and you try to figure out, okay, what can we do better? Take out the fact that Auburn, what they did this game, what they did earlier in the season, the matchups that they were able to create to take advantage of USC. What can we do as a program? And that's what South Carolina needs to do. They got to go back to the drawing board. And I think more than anything, you just need to continue to find ways to get into your rhythm from a shooting standpoint, right? You need to be able to start making threes. This is a team, throughout the course of the season, it's not that they've relied on the three, Joe. We've seen games where they'll go down the paint, but we've also seen games where, hey, you know what? Maybe they're not doing so well in the paint. What do? They kick it to the outside, and those threes start to drop that just wasn't the case this week in Nashville. Not just today, but yesterday as well. They need to be able to get into that rhythm because it's going to be vital for them. If something's not working in the NCAA tournament, they're not able to get things going down the paint. I can't envision it being the same way like we saw today just because of some of the matchups that we talked about with Auburn and some of the
absolutely. I think today
matches.
you kind of learn how to play 2 games in
some of the mix matches that they were able to create, but just being able to get those threes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think playing 2 games in 2 days, they're gonna take what they want from this one, right, with the shooting, how to keep it consistent. I think this was going to be a test for the NCAA tournament, whatever happened. But again, shooting. This team knows they had to shoot the ball better. Come up. I mean, it is kind of a clutch factor too. This team, you had to perform on the big stage, and they just didn't. Right? They laid a goose egg, and it's going to hurt. I think this team will take this loss and use it right at something that South Carolina fans can't hold on to at this point. A little glimmer of hope, finding some in times, right? South Carolina's been really, really, really good with rebounding from losses, right? I think this season we've been they've only lost 2 games in a row once, so that should give you some hope, at least for the very first round, right? And then when you get into the second round, we'll see how this team plays. Tough loss against Auburn, bad matchup, but you live and you learn. You're right that this team has been good at flushing things recently in the past this season. So to look at the bright side, I guess that's one of them. But you gotta shoot the ball better.
Yeah, so you start to look ahead. South Carolina will find out on Sunday where they're playing, when they're playing, as they get set to play in their first March Madness tournament since that 2016-17 season. I think more than anything with this team, Joe, obviously it's a totally new season, but in the regular season, this was a team that only had back-to-back losses once. And that's not saying, okay, South Carolina, they lost today, they're going to be able to bounce back in the first round. Let's wait and see what that matchup is. But the point being is this is a team that throughout the course of the season, anytime they lost, they were able to bounce back. They were able to respond outside of losing back-to-back games just once, which is very damn impressive when you think about it, especially for a team that only had 11 wins a year ago. I think more than anything, when you look back on this year, I think we're going to learn a lot about what this team's made of. And obviously, they've achieved so much. It's not like if they go into the tournament, God forbid they struggle in the first round, the case may be, that doesn't take anything away from what they've been able to accomplish. Tying a program record for wins yesterday, still have a lot to play for as they get ready for the NCAA tournament. But I think with this team, I'm interested to see how they're going to respond, knowing that, hey, we've achieved so much, but if we lose again, that's it. That's all she wrote. You lose once in the conference tournament, hey, you know what? We're going to be still playing in the NCAA tournament. How does this team respond knowing that their back's up against the wall? That's what I'm interested to see the most from a team that has done so much, for a team that we'll be talking about for many, many years after everything they've been able to accomplish, especially knowing where they were a year ago.
Yeah, and Mike, I think this team plays well with their backs up against the wall, right? Do or die time, and they still probably think are overlooked a little bit. And again, it is a bad matchup, and we talked about that, sure. But you had a chance to go prove some of the doubters wrong. Now your back's really up against the wall in the NCAA tournament. This is what you make of it. You can't lose, right? Single elimination, as we all know. So you can't make any mistakes. Next week, fouls are going to be called a little bit tighter, because as we know, officials they're reffing to move on as well, so it's going to be a little bit tighter. The game's going to be a little bit, more uptight as well. So it'll be interesting to see how South Carolina comes out. I think if they bring that do or die mentality out to the tournament, they should be fine. But again, it's going to be a tough seed, right? Because I think they're going to be within 3 to 5 seed, right? So they're going to have a tougher game. And whoever they're playing is good in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, good teams will make the NCAA tournament. But it'll be interesting if they bring that backs up against the wall. We can't lose kind of mentality. I think South Carolina has a really, really good chance of maybe winning 1, maybe 2 in the first and second round of the NCAA tournament. We'll see, but it needs to be that mentality. Right? Backs up against the wall. We done so much good this season. Now, like, let's go, make it even more memorable, right? They've got a chance to cap off, one of the most surprising seasons in school history, and one of the quickest turnarounds in probably SEC history for a program. So, this team still controls their destiny. Season's not over yet, but you will finish today.
Trying to take some positives away from this week, not just today, but from this week in general. You have some young players on this team. Obviously, a guy like Colin Murray-Boyles playing in his first conference tournament. It's not apples to apples, but I see Robert saying, and I agree, Robert, playing yesterday, it hurt him in the sense of, okay, we're not used to this for some of those guys. They're not used to it. This was their first taste. So now you go back to the drawing board, and I say it's not apples to apples because if you're able to win the first round, you're going to have that day off in between, but then it's a quick turnaround. And you're not going to have a lot of time to be able to study your opponent. You're going to have to go out there, and you're going to have to just basically just play ball. Let's just call for what it is. So for this South Carolina team, especially the younger players in this tournament, being able to get the taste this week in Nashville, you hope you're able to take something positive away from it so that heading into the NCAA tournament next week, you have an idea of, hey, you know what? We could have a good day one day, but we need to be able to flush it when we play the next day. We have to be able to flush these things. If we didn't do good, whether it be from behind the arc or whatever the case may be, maybe just from an individual standpoint, maybe you did not have a great game. You're going to have to flush and move forward. So Colin Murray-Boyles, we know what he was able to do yesterday. You can tell from today. I mean, he took some hits. This was a very physical game. The refs, they let him play for the most part on both ends. South Carolina, they got to the free throw line a good bit. So you can't really complain in that regard. South Carolina, 20 of 28 from the line today. Auburn went to the line 17 times. They were 9 of 17. I'm interested, though, Joe, to just see how they're going to respond, knowing that, okay, we have to understand if we win one game, we got to flush it. We have to flush it and move on, because they were able to get a small sample size taste of what the NCAA tournament's going to be like in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, we've been talking about it for like the last, 5-10 minutes. But the way that this team has responded early on in the season, it was because of their veteran leaders, right? It was the Misha Johnsons, the BJ Max that stepped up, and even Zach Davis a little bit. They just believed in themselves, right? I think it's going to be hard to believe in, yourself and just in general in this team after this game. But inside, it's all the chemistry, right? Like we hear about the chemistry, how close is this team, yada, yada. This is where it comes into play, right here. You lose a tough game in the SEC tournament, right? One that you had a very good chance to win if you shot the ball better. It's all about rebounding from this, flushing it, and that comes down to the senior leadership, right? The BJ Mack, the Michie Johnsons of the world, right? It's how do you preach it to the younger guys and the guys who haven't been here, right? How do you preach that a postseason loss and still more basketball played, right? Because you can't let it derail your whole season, because it's far from over. The meaningful basketball is next. So you can't let a loss in the SEC tournament really derail everything, right? You have to respond well. And again, I think the leaders on this team, Mac, Michie Johnson, Vaughn Cooper, these guys are gonna, they're gonna take what you learn from today. You obviously have to absorb it. Come Monday, I think this team will be ready to go for the NCAA tournament.
South Carolina will find out where they're going in the NCAA tournament on Sunday. Selection Sunday will be starting at 6 p.m. The Gamecocks are going to be holding a private watch party at Home Team Barbecue. Unfortunately, that is closed to the public, but the media, we are allowed to go there. So we'll provide some scenes for you, what some of the players had to say. Maybe Lamont Paris, I believe Lamont Paris is going to be talking. So be sure to tune into Gamecock Central on Sunday. We'll get you caught up on men's basketball as well as the women's basketball program later on in the night around 8 o'clock. That's when the women's program will find out where they're going to be headed, because they will be the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament for the women's bracket. All right, Joe, a couple other things I want to talk about today. We see the contract with Lamont Paris. Gets it approved. For the most part, it's about $4 million a year, goes up to $5 million that final year of that 2029-2030 season. He's been able to accomplish a lot, and I know that on a day like today, there's going to be probably a portion of this fan base that doesn't want to hear the moral victories, but what they've been able to achieve so far, they've been able to achieve a lot. But like you said, this team still feels doubted. And I feel like after what happened today, there's probably a lot of players on this team that are going to go into the NCAA tournament and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we've won 26 games. Yeah, we've been able to do this. We've been able to do that. We've been able to set this record. We've been able to rewrite the record books here, program history. But heading into the NCAA tournament, we want to prove to people that this wasn't a fluke. What do you think the message is going to be from Lamont Paris this week as this team tries to rebound back and tries to flush it as they get ready for their first NCAA tournament in nearly a decade?
Yeah, Mike, I mean, I think this is just, to flush it, but then you're a better team than you were out there today, right? We've seen that. This is one of the worst shooting performances this team has had all year. So I go in, flush it. You're a better team than what you were, just giving these guys confidence, too, to get right back on track, because a tough shooting night can knock off a lot of confidence the team has. So I still think that they feel doubted, but, I mean, Lamont's goal this week should just be get the confidence back on track. Play like you were when, calling for the AP to rank you and stuff like that. You need to bring that same energy, that same, swagger. It's like we're underrated still and that kind of thing. But so that's the thing that I'm kind of worries me a little bit because it will throw some of that confidence off track. Again, Michi didn't have the best shooting weekend, but we know, Michi is a streaky shooter. He's been through shooting struggles before in his career. They're going to get it back on track. But I think, like, after answering the question you asked, was like, what does Lamont preach? He's doing his best to just confidence back. And again, I don't know how much exactly we'll know after, all of the interviews and everything comes out where these guys' heads are at. But just got to get the confidence back on track. Play with that underrated swagger that we're being doubted still, and everyone's overlooking us. And so far it takes the mark because the team was playing like that, and then you also build on that, right? If their first round game goes, they're proving something, and it's like, oh crap, South Carolina, and everyone's playing like that. Really ride that mantra like they have done all year, and being picked to finish last in the SEC and still, finishing up with 25, 26 wins is pretty damn good. So it's, they still need to play with that, underrated swagger, but confidence.
South Carolina struggled to force turnovers today. Give Auburn credit for protecting the basketball. Only 5 turnovers by the Tigers. That only led to 2 points for USC today. So when we look ahead to some of the things, where can they be better at, right? Where can they be better at? And I know you're comparing this against a team from a matchup standpoint that not one of the better matchups in South Carolina, but just moving forward, what can they do when you focus on yourself, when you look in the mirror, being able to cause more turnovers? This is something that South Carolina has done a phenomenal job throughout the course of the season. And what we've seen from them, even going back to yesterday's game, is that when USC has been able to do that, that's when they're really able to dictate the tempo of the game. They're really able to go from an offensive standpoint, slow the game down, and do what they want to do. And at that point, that's where you see the frustration from other teams. That's where you see South Carolina throwing the zone out there, going to that 1-3-1, and being able to frustrate teams as they go into the second half because they've been able to control the tempo so well. So being able to force those turnovers, I think that's one thing in particular that South Carolina needs to do outside of the offense, which is being able to find their shot again. A guy like Michi Johnson, look, it wasn't his week from a shooting standpoint. We've seen that throughout the course of the season. I'm not going to lose confidence in Michi. I feel like we've seen it before, where sometimes he goes into these slumps, but he's able to come out on the other side, and he's been able to respond in big ways, whether it be coming out maybe after only scoring 3 points, 4 points, 6 points, whatever, and then he comes out, puts up 20 points. We've seen that multiple times this season. But it wasn't just Michi today. It wasn't just Michi. When you look at the stat sheet and you look at what South Carolina just they weren't able to do. I mean, Davis put up 10, BJ Mack put up 14, but when you look at just from a shooting standpoint, across the board, from a field goal standpoint, 16 of 57 as a team. No one really shot the ball well today for this Gamecock team, Joe. So I get it. It's easy to look at Michi because I've seen some of the comments already. We need Michi to score. We've seen South Carolina still win games without Michi. And that's not saying, Michi just gets a pass. But what it's saying is this was not just the Michi thing today. This was a South Carolina thing across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't have said it better myself, Mike. And then also, before we get to ads real quick, Philip makes a good point here in this comment. Teams that are well-rounded, high offensive attack and speeders are weakness. Doesn't help that everyone struggled to shoot today. Still very good point. I mean, these guys still played hard, right? I don't think you need to undercut any of the effort. I'm sure the final score was what it was, but I mean, still gave it everything. And Talon Cooper still he gave it a go with the bum ankle, right? We saw that. He came out and couldn't really give it everything or much at all, and Lamont just pulled the plug on it, right? But if anyone's questioning quitting this team, I think you need to reconsider, because it's for a lack of effort. Like,
all right, Joe, let's hit those ads. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at Liberty Tax.
Yeah, Mike, tax ID is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through alone. New taxes at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia. Walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, guaranteed you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for a refund, call me texting at Liberty Tax. Tax accurate and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you're not dealing with the Sam, talk to the tax team. Make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. 99 on weekdays and 95 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through the tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give them to upload your tax documents. When you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call on your screen right now. And for those listening, 803-462-5576. Once again, 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs this season.
Today's show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage. If you're in the process of purchasing a home or looking for the lowest rate on the market, do the same thing that our very own Wes Mitchell, as well as former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Forth did, and that is give Clint Hammond a call. That number is 803-771-6933. Clint Hammond, a longtime supporter of not just Gamecock Central, but the main sponsor of all these GC Live shows. All right, Joe, final thoughts. A little bit of a quicker show today on this Friday as we approach the 5:30 Central Time out here in Nashville, 6:30, getting close back on the East Coast out in Columbia. Just your final thoughts on not just today, but maybe this week and what lies ahead for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, Mike, obviously tough one. It's Auburn today. I think, you got to flush it, right? Bad matchup for you. Hope you don't see them somewhere in the NCAA tournament. But as of now, and Auburn continuing to go gives you hope. But you got to flush this one, right? It was just a poor shooting night. You can't win everyone and can't shoot the ball well on every single night, right? I think this team needs to get their confidence back. I think, depending on how much they lost after this game, I'm assuming, you're going to take a concept after that. But this team, they've got a week, right? They've got a week. They've got to rest. They'll find out their destination on Sunday. So they'll get back to Columbia, just kind of get back to the basics, get back in the groove of things, and then fully prepare for whoever is possibly next in the NCAA tournament. But, until Sunday, they won't know where they're going. And then afterwards, I think it's all hands on deck, right? You want to continue the mantra that you're underrated, because I think this team responds well to it, and we'll see what happens, right, Mike? I think this team is one of them that you never know what you're going to get when you show up, and especially to a point like an NCAA tournament. Really not sure what we're going to get from South Carolina, so it'll be interesting to see what Lamont has to say after this one, and also how he plans on getting things back on track. But if the week where he gets his extension, I think that should give fans some hope, right? They're in a good spot with this roster, and solid week. There's bright sides to be looked upon, but really tough one with Auburn today.
Bottom line is you got to get back to Columbia. You got to recalibrate. You got to flush this, as we've mentioned multiple times. But I think more than anything, Joe, what you do is you go back and you remind yourself what you were able to accomplish, not just here this week. And I know people are going to roll their eyes when I say that, or be like, what are you talking about? I'll get into that in just a minute. But you go back and you look at the big picture of everything you've been able to accomplish already this season and remind yourself, hey, you know what? People weren't expecting us to get to this point, to get back to March Madness, especially after being an 11-win team last year. What I mean about this week, while it was an ugly way to go out of the SEC tournament, South Carolina was able to do something that had not been done in program history since 2018, and that was go to the SEC tournament and win at least one game. Now, does that mean the bar is set very low when we're talking about something like that? I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but I think what it shows is this team was able to achieve something that hadn't been done in quite some time. So you try to find some type of positive. You try to look at that glass as half full opposed to half empty. So I think with this Gamecock team, you go back to Columbia, you move on from this, you get ready for something that this city has been just dying to get back to. And you have that opportunity coming up next week. And the Gamecocks will find out when they're playing, where they're playing come Sunday on Selection Sunday. Well, that's going to do it here for us out in Nashville. Be sure to follow Gamecock Central for anything else you want to read and watch from this past week out here in Nashville as we start to turn the page, just like the team will, with the NCAA tournament coming up next week. If you missed any of our show or any of the content from Nashville this week, head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page where you can watch it for free in its entirety. Hit that little bell icon. You can subscribe and get notified anytime a GC video is uploaded to the Gamecock Central YouTube page, or head on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network where you can listen to any of the GC podcasts as well as radio shows on 107.5 The Game. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Cuban. Thank you to everyone that tuned in for these 3 days out here in Nashville after arriving here on Wednesday. We'll be back at it Selection Sunday. We'll keep you guys posted as well as what's going on with the women's team. But we will be having GC Live post-game shows for both teams throughout March. Anyone that came out to Nashville, safe travels back. We'll see you in Columbia. Enjoy your Friday and be safe. Take care, Columbia. Take care, Gamecock Nation.